Hi, welcome to Barnsley and 10. Today's chat is about the Crucible, and part one, there'll be two. Part one is really focusing on the significance of the title, where it takes place, and who the main role players are. So if you're lazy, I hope you aren't, but if you're lazy or if you're just feeling a bit overwhelmed by the book, this is to help you navigate the story. It's not to replace the reading of the story, you still have to do that. But let's have a look at the title, The Crucible. It can refer to two things primarily. The first thing is the process of melting down metal to purify it so that you get rid of all the gritty bits and you emerge with this beautiful, perfect, pure substance. And the second meaning is quite similar, but it's a little more symbolic. If you go through a crucible type experience, it's as if you will have endured and suffered, and then you too emerge stronger, more pure, a sense of integrity. You're a survivor. So those are the two possible meanings of the crucible. So as you read the story, think about the literal and figurative crucibles that are affecting the characters and the storyline. The second thing I'd like to explore is the context of the story. So at one level, it's a historical drama. It takes place in the 1692 in Salem, and it concerns the burning of witches. So it's a little bit later than Shakespeare's time, but if you think of Macbeth, the idea of witchcraft and the threat of witches, black magic, evil, it was extremely real. One of the ways to test if a woman was a witch was to throw her in a lake, and if she floated, she definitely was a witch, and so therefore she should be burnt alive to expel the devil. And if she drowned, she was pure, but at least her soul would go to heaven. I'm sure that's huge comfort for her family members. So there is this context of a fearful society, a puritanical society, where witchcraft, demonology, black magic is something to be feared, something dangerous, and it must be eliminated at any price. And the other context is of the 1950s in America, the era of Governor McCarthy. So McCarthyism really is built on this idea that communists, not witches, communists are to be feared. Anyone who has liberal or humanitarian tendencies is considered dangerous. You need to be a capitalist, and anything Russian or communist is to be expelled, burnt, eliminated, just like the witches in Salem. So if you look at that dual nature of the storyline, bear in mind that Arthur Miller himself was accused of un-American activities. He was blacklisted, and one of the reasons for that blacklisting is that he would not rat out or inform or give the names of others that McCarthy deemed un-American. So he wouldn't accuse or blame or take the focus away from himself by damning others. And because of that integrity, he too was persecuted. So just to recap very quickly, the Crucible, a test of character, a way of evolving your integrity, standing up to trials and tough conditions in the furnace of life, and then the dual nature of the narrative, either a story about witches or a story about persecution in a narrow-minded society. And you'll find those links. It's quite straightforward. Let's look a little bit at the style. Remember that style refers to how something is written, and at times you might find the Crucible a little bit alienating, the frequent use of that title goody. It's a bit frustrating, a bit archaic. And then even using words like bid and unto, it does sound a little old-fashioned. Just persist, because once you decode and just read for the storyline, it's a storyline that still has relevance today. There's still people who are narrow-minded and threatened and power-hungry, and they are using all sorts of rules and fears in order to destroy anyone who threatens them. So that story is universal. And if you look through the idea of the witches and the slightly unfamiliar language, you will find a story that still has relevance, probably in every country ever. Let's look at the who now, the characters. The protagonist is John Proctor. We see him as basically an honourable man, a good man. He's not perfect, he's flawed, he did cheat. He had an affair with the servant, Abigail. His wife knows about this affair, and it appears that she's forgiven him, but Elizabeth Proctor also, perhaps you question her sort of detached, distant demeanour. She's quite aloof. She also is quite interesting in that you think she's so perfect, and yet she's willing to lie under oath, and she lies for a good reason. She's doing her very best to protect the reputation of her husband, and her husband loves her so much that he's willing to have his reputation ruined by admitting to adultery. And so when he's honourable and honest, and she tries to keep his reputation but lies, we have this awareness of one of many dilemmas. They both are quite protective, which is admirable, but you question, when is it time to be honest, and when is it time to bend the rules? And unfortunately their timing was off. Then we have Reverend Paris. He's described as cutting a villainous path, and he definitely is a villain. He's in charge of this religious community. He's very austere, very harsh, very judgmental, but also his job is at risk. If suddenly in his territory there are multiple witches, that doesn't say much for his sermons. So as someone who is a Puritan but is also threatened, look at his context and how he behaves. His niece, Abigail, is the one who had the affair with John. And he's also witnessed her cavorting in the woods naked and dancing and trying to summon up spirits, which could be, a childlike prank. Teenagers are notoriously rebellious. Or it could be, the beginning of a career in demonology. So he feels threatened. She's a relative. Betty, his daughter, after frolicking with Abigail in the woods, Betty seems to be gravely ill, and the doctor can find no medical reason for this ailment. So, of course, medicine in those days was quite primitive, but there also doesn't seem to be anything physically wrong. And so if she is possessed, what does that say about her father and his powerlessness? And then we have John Hale, a specialist in witchcraft. You can look at the dilemmas that he faces, the decisions he makes, the advice he gives others. We've got Ruth Putnam, also part of the Forest Brigade of dancers, and she's also not well. Her parents, Thomas and Mrs. Putnam, are extremely problematic. Mrs. Putnam, we feel for her. She's lost 7 babies. They've died. And she obviously feels guilty, broken, damaged, heartsore about the loss of all those children. And now this other child is gravely ill. But her husband is quite a land grabber. He is quite eager to possess some strategically placed farms, and he isn't afraid who he accuses in order to gain that territory. Giles Corey is an older man, and rather than defame others or implicate his wife, when he's prosecuted and he's put to death in an excruciating way, he has an enormous stone rolled over him. And you'd think that he's just a fringe character, not that significant, but he says a little more weight as he's dying. He asks for more weight in defiance of his persecutors. We've got a judge, and he's eager to be seen as strong and decisive, but is he just? That's something you can explore. So broadly, think about the characters as part of this puritanical community, this community where harshness and hard work and rigidity are deemed as valuable. And how would you survive in a society that's very narrow? If you think about yourself at school, how do you feel about school rules and regulations? Even how do you feel about grammar? Are you like E.E. Cummings, wanting to be wayward and defiant and experimental and creative? Or are you accepting all the commas and full stops and semicolons? What does a narrow society expect of its citizens? And how does it behave towards those that rebel? Okay, that's the beginning of the Crucible. If you enjoyed this clip, please like and share, spread the word. And the next one on the Crucible will be more analytical, exploring themes, dilemmas that the characters face. And I hope you tune in for some more tips. Take care.